What is up, all my beautiful, beautiful YouTube friends? I am here today to do a video that I took to Instagram, posting a photo of myself this morning, kind of a recent-ish physique update photo, and I disclosed, this is the picture here from Instagram, if those follow me there, Kara Corey Fit Life. I just kind of discussed a bit on this photo, kind of rambled just about some of the self-reflection I've had post-show. Yes, I'm still talking about post-show, but it's been such a huge learning period for me, and still remains so, that I feel like I am starting to make some progress. And that's why I want to share those things with you. I mentioned on that photo that there's a period of time I was pretty ashamed for how things went down post-show. And essentially, I'm not really sitting here ashamed of it anymore because I'm sharing it with you guys. But more so, I feel like I'm not surprised by how things went post-show was basically what I alluded to on that photo. I'm really not surprised, and part of why I, think things went the way they did post-show contributes a lot to my entire life and kind of my whole fitness journey and kind of a lot of my mentality, which isn't always, it's not such a great thing, that's been with me for a very long time. A lot of this I haven't really shared on YouTube before, and I don't know why I feel like opening up about it, but I just kind of feel like I want to because, I am out there on social media. I want to help people, and, maybe this will help you guys a bit. So, to kind of go back in time, a really long time, because I'm talking about competing and how that impacted me, but I don't want people to be confused that I feel like competitions are to blame. I know a couple people did comment that on my photo, and I do think competing can be really triggering and can be damaging for a lot of people. It can also be really amazing. I feel like competing to me is a good memory for me. It's a good positive thing that's been in my life. I don't look at it as this evil thing that happened to me and I allowed it to ruin my life. Not whatsoever. Competing has been nothing but amazing memories for me. Some people have asked if I'm competing in the future, and I wouldn't count that out, but for me, I had to come to terms with that, competing for me wasn't going to happen again unless I'm really in a good place too. And I think that's important for anyone to know. Going into a competition, you have to be mentally ready, and I did discuss all that in another video, so we can link that below and you guys can check out that video. But for me, I think I've just had this mentality my entire life that's not a good mentality. And really, and someone asked too, if I feel like how I grew up, maybe how my family raised me, if any of that impacted anything. And I really don't think it did. I had a really great upbringing. I did see in my upbringing a little difference that I think maybe did contribute a bit to some of my focus on being thin in most of my life, being really important to be thin. Growing up, my sister's a couple years older than me, and she was overweight at a young age. So from a young age, I started to see this difference in people commenting on my body size. It was like this really positive thing when I'd be with my parents at a young age and we'd run into their friends or family or whoever. And I was a petite little person. I'm still a petite little person. I get my genetics from my dad's side of the family, where it's just a bunch of little small French Canadian people. That's where my body frame came from. So I was always a really petite kid, really chubby baby, but babies are supposed to be chubby, but very petite. And a lot of people always commented on that. It was this amazing thing. You're so small, you're so little, you're so thin, you don't weigh that much, you're so teeny. And it's amazing that at such a young age that I didn't even realize that it was impacting me. And then overhearing the comments, and the focus on my sister and her eating habits, as she had to watch her weight growing up, being a little bit overweight, struggling with food for her at a young age. So I don't think my family or my, how they raised me was a negative experience at all, but for whatever reason, I was programmed at a young age to be kind of fixated on it. And I just was very, like in tune with how other people commented on people's weight and just this desire to be thin. At elementary school it started. For whatever reason, like I'm in second grade caring about how much I weighed and thinking that being a lower weight was better. And, I remember just being really proud being like so little. I don't know why, but it was there. And I reflect on that now with the things that I struggle with because I think it's part of it all. I think it's part of the whole picture. And if you're someone who's struggling, which you probably are, or else you wouldn't be watching my videos lately, then you might be able to relate to this. And I just really recommend you kind of think back to your entire life and what may be impacting you and I'm going to reference Kelly Yu. If you guys haven't subscribed to her channel, we'll link it below as well. But she's just incredible. Her videos have such great content in them and some really like mind-blowing things to think about if you're someone who's struggled with any type of disordered eating. So go check out her channel. She's definitely inspired me to reflect more on some of the things that are impacting and had impacted my behaviors recently. So anyways, my childhood, for whatever reason, I was very focused on being thin, being small. I had it in my head that eating less was better, to the point where like I didn't think eating was cool. Like I never was diagnosed with an eating disorder. I never truly had, I feel like I've had disordered eating habits my whole life, but I was never diagnosed with an eating disorder. But, I didn't eat a lot as a kid. Like there was those things that I picked up on. And so I became a very picky eater at a young age and, just focused on being small and petite and thin was really important to me at a young age, which I find very fucked up to think about. Like, I'm not sure why at such a young age, something like that was impacting my thoughts and my little mind. So I think back to those times and I reflect over my whole life and think about the fact that that's something that stayed with me. Obviously I wanted to become a dietitian. Part of that was because I had family members that had, health issues. My mom's mom, my grandmother died at a really young age, in my opinion, with heart disease. And, I had a lot of obesity, heart disease, diabetes, things like that in my family that kind of made me, think going into dietetics would be like a really great field to help, create healthy habits and to help others figure out how to live a healthier lifestyle. But then there was also this tiny disordered part of me that thought, well, if I go into the field of being a dietitian, it's like a guarantee I'm going to be like in really good shape my whole life. This is kind of messed up, but that was the thought I had as a 17-year-old girl. If I go into this field, it's like a guarantee I'm going to be thin my whole life, and a lot of people with screwed up eating habits, disordered eating, do go into the field of dietetics. I'm putting it out there, and so that was one of my little thoughts going into college, again, still being very focused on food my whole life and turning to the love of exercise, which again, exercise is not a bad thing. But when I look back at how much I exercised at certain periods of my life, I definitely had those over-exercising tendencies. And I think I developed some bad eating habits from that. Not bad eating habits, let me rephrase that. Bad thoughts associated with it, So I became a marathon runner, have a long history of marathon running. And part of the problem with my mindset then was like, well, if I want to go out and have a burger and fries or whatever, I'm just going to run more. Like, I have to do 9 miles today if that's what I'm going to eat. I created these contingencies in my mind, like I had to do certain mileages. I had to run a certain distance in order to be able to eat what I wanted to, which is so messed up. Like, you have to eat because food is fuel and it's nourishing, and there's nothing wrong with eating food because it tastes good, but you shouldn't have to run 9 miles because you want to go out to dinner with your boyfriend. I mean, that's just messed up. And I'm not saying these things to trigger anyone. I'm just kind of giving you some insight into some of these things. I'm going, wow, this was my mentality for such a long time. I created so many food rules for myself that, I think it's what's made food a challenge for me most of my life, Food's never been an easy thing for me. I've loved it. I've always loved it, but it's always been a struggle for me. It hasn't been like wake up, eat like whatever normal is, and be done with it. It's something that for a big part of my life comprised a lot of my thoughts, almost feeling like a prisoner to these thoughts about what am I going to eat next, what do I eat now, and how does that impact what I eat at dinner time, and counting calories for a long period of time. I worked at a weight loss camp when I graduated college, which was probably not a good experience for me. Working at that weight loss camp, I followed the same diet as these girls, which I don't even ethically agree with, this diet that these girls were on. I followed it myself because you had to, and I lost so much weight, and I felt like I was so skinny and finally had abs, and that's what looked good. That was at the time that like Lindsay Lohan and Nicole Richie were all anorexic, and it was all over the media, and that's what like girls looked at and thought we were supposed to look like. That was the first time I ever binged, was at that summer camp. I was so deprived of food. And this is like the weirdest thing, but I ate an entire package of Fig Newtons. I'll never forget that because it was the first time I ever binged. I didn't even really know what happened or why I did it. But it was from being so freaking deprived. I mean, I was so thin, lacking nutrition, eating super low fat, and I just felt out of control, and that was a result of that. And that was the first time I ever binged, and I don't really remember if I openly admitted that to even Jason at the time or my sister, who I tend to share everything with, but it was a very weird time, and I didn't really understand it, but that was kind of my first issue with binging. And the first time I was really like super on a set diet that impacted my body weight, and I had to deal with gaining that weight back when I came back to reality. And I kept always striving to get back to like this lower body weight. I mean, this was something I struggled with till probably like mid 20s, you know, really up until I got into weightlifting. And when I got into weightlifting, I think that was really a beneficial change for me in terms of my mindset. I started to learn to view my body differently. I didn't care anymore as much about being skinny. And it did take a while for me to shift in that mentality. But, you know, getting into weightlifting, focusing on bodybuilding, building a strong body, having muscles, feeling fit, that was a really, really great thing for me to change my mindset and to focus more on that aspect of things. It didn't necessarily change the food rules and some of those thoughts that I had going on in my head, but that was a good shift in my life for me, was focusing on that and focusing on the competitions. And I do want to put out there and say I competed for several years and didn't necessarily have issues post-competition. Like turning pro was the worst. I struggled after a competition, so I'm not competition bashing whatsoever. I don't blame the competitions. I think you have to really figure out what's going on inside your head. And as Kelly says in a lot of her videos, it's not the food. Like there's more going on than the food. It's really not the food. You really have to assess and sit down and figure out why you're feeling these things, whether it's being restrictive in nature or if it's binging. And I feel like I've now had experience with both. And in a way, it feels more acceptable in society to be a restrictor. You know, I was truly a restrictor the majority of my life, and I still struggle with those thoughts in my head. Like I've had to fight those thoughts a lot this summer post-competition, because in my mind, after having issues with binging, I just wanted to get back to the body I had. Not stage body, but I just wanted to get back to being normal. In my head, I'm like, well, I just need to restrict. I just need to not eat carbs for a few days. I just need to do this. I need to overexercise, all those things. I'm like, no, stop, Carrot. You need, at some point in your life, you need to stop with these negative relationships with food and exercise. They need to be positive experiences. And if I'm ever going to really feel comfortable and happy and just love my body, and it's challenging. So you really have to assess what's going on. Why am I dealing with things with food? And it's usually, not always, but it's usually an emotional type response for me. So I really had to sit down and figure out what was triggering me to binge and overeat and keep wanting to eat, or what was causing me to want to restrict. And it's not an easy thing. I try to be a realistic person, but I'm not someone that always wants to feel the feels. Like, I don't always want to sit down and like feel my feelings and talk about it. A lot of times things might piss me off, like if I'm at work or even outside of work, and I'll just suck it up and deal. That's the right thing to do. Just suck it up and deal. And then I end up reacting with food, whether I realize it in the moment or if I don't realize it till afterwards. A lot of times that's how I might handle a stressful situation. If someone pisses me off or if things aren't going Kara's way, that is how I cope sometimes. It took me a while to even learn that about myself. So number one, just like learning that about yourself can be so powerful because then you're more aware of it. And then you have to learn, how are you going to deal with it differently in the future. And just being mindful of it and figuring out the why it's happening is a really big part of it. And has been a really big part of my progress for me, and I think it's just going to keep getting better. I have felt really positive about my birthday this year. I think a lot of people feel really freaked out when they're in their 30s, and for me, I got so excited for this birthday because I feel like I'm finally becoming a woman who's okay with herself and able to process my thoughts, my feelings, why I'm doing things, be honest with myself. And it's something that I didn't do a lot of my life in my 20s, I mean, there's some really mature 20-year-olds out there, at least from what I see on social media. And in my 20s, I didn't care to really dive that deep into my feelings or why I was doing things I was doing. You get in your 30s and it's like, I gotta figure my shit out. I'm in my 30s now. So that's kind of like how I've been managing things. And especially post-competition, it just became clear to me that I can't just jump into another competition to get thin. What is going on with me and why? Why do I have this unhealthy relationship with food and working out? Like, those are positive things. Let's get them back to being positive things. And it's caused me to really dig deep and think about a lot of things that have occurred over my life. Yeah, I probably need a little therapy or something. Maybe that's what some of you are thinking right now. But, for me, just being more aware of what's going on and why has really helped me mentally feel happier and healthy. And not having that like all or nothing approach is really, really challenging. I know this is a lot of rambling, so if you hear certain topics or things that you want me to do separate videos about, I can do that. I just kind of wanted to give you guys a little bit of history on my history. I wanted to give you a little insight as to where some of these things have come from in my life. And there is a lot of pressure as a dietitian. I know someone asked that on my Instagram, how that changes my views. It doesn't necessarily change my views, but it's made me, I think, be very careful what I put out there on social media and what I've shared with others. People have this perception that dietitians are perfect and perfect little eaters, and they've never had to struggle. I think people also, my fear was I would share with people what my struggles are, and they would think I'm less of a dietitian because of that, or I'm unable to help people because I've struggled. When in reality, that's just not the truth. That's not how things work. I think being a dietitian, you just have that perception of people. So I don't know. It's made me less quick to open up about this stuff, but I think it is helpful for people. So that's why I self-disclose and I say these things. I also know, I think I just want to put this out there to be mindful, with me saying all this stuff. You never know what people are going through. Some people aren't as vocal as me with saying they're struggling and have been struggling. Some people are just going to, act like they've got all their shit together. But you can't judge anyone. You never ever know what someone's dealing with, what someone's struggling with. And I know for me, like growing up, I never actually had a weight problem. I've always been a small, petite person. So people always looked at me and just assumed, and that was the biggest thing I always hated, was like, well, you have it easy, you're thin. You've got it made, you're a dietitian, you're thin. And just because I was small or thin or what you think is a good body doesn't mean I don't struggle. It doesn't mean I don't struggle as much as someone who's obese. Like, mentally, you never know what someone's going through. So just be mindful of that and be kind to other people. You never know what they're struggling with, and there's no need to compare to someone else's journey or struggle or story. We all have our own different things that we battle with, and a lot of people battle with food and their weight and with unhealthy thoughts regarding that. And then for some people, they don't. And it's really easy, and they just look at food as fuel, and it's not something that consumes them. And that's great, So we all struggle with different things. So my point with that is just to be mindful of it. I think I'll stop this video here because I don't know if I have a point other than I was just trying to give you guys a little bit of background. I do want to say thank you for all your support. I know some people said, don't be ashamed, Kara, your body's beautiful. And I can honestly say, I do feel really good about myself, regardless of, I always have in the back of my head kind of lingering, the difference in my weight now versus what it used to be, and, wanting to get down on myself. But I think I do a good job at, believing that I do, I have a good body, and it's good to me, and it's beautiful, and there's nothing wrong with that, regardless of the number on the scale. So anyways, I'm going to wrap it up. That was a whole lot of rambling. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope in some odd way it was helpful and not triggering, and, made you more mindful of maybe some of the things you're going through, have gone through, or maybe how it's impacting you now. So future videos, if you guys want more, if there's anything I can help with in terms of kind of that history of disordered eating patterns, I'd be glad to do more videos on it. Please let me know what you would find helpful, and thank you guys. Keep checking back for more. I just want to jump into squats like your heaviest that you can squat. You want to make sure your body's nice and warmed up. For me, it's important that I'm kind of focusing on my form. I'm not, sitting here claiming to have the best squat form. I know there's always room for improvement. So that's why it's important for me to kind of check my ego at the door and just focus on my form. So for 135, that's something that's always felt heavy to me. I've never been someone